The conference room held the scent of lemon polish, expensive leather, and the sharp, clean aroma of betrayal. It was a fragrance June Sterling had grown intimately acquainted with over the past 3 years. Today, however, it carried a final, metallic tang across the 20 feet of polished mahogany. Richard Sterling, soon to be Richard Thorne again, scratched his signature with a flourish. The Montblanc pen, a gift from her on their 5th anniversary, moved with a confidence that caused June's jaw to tighten imperceptibly. "And that's the last one," Richard said, capping the pen and slipping it into the breast pocket of his Tom Ford suit. A suit bought with her money. Everything about him was bought with her money. Freedom never felt so bureaucratic. His lawyer, a sleek man named Arthur Finch, offered a practiced, neutral smile. "Just the standard post-nuptial dissolution, Richard. The state of California requires its paperwork." He gathered the thick stack of documents, tapping them neatly on the table. "The judge will enter the final decree this afternoon. The 30-day review period for the asset division schedule will commence then." June's lawyer, Eleanor Vance, did not smile. Her steel-gray bob was a helmet. Her eyes, behind rimless glasses, were like chips of flint. "The schedule is non-negotiable," she stated. "As per the pre-existing marital agreement, any attempt to litigate the division outside of the agreed framework will be viewed as bad faith and will trigger the penalty clauses." Richard waved a dismissive hand, his eyes already drifting to the smartphone lying face up on the table beside him. It lit up with a notification, a pink heart emoji, visible to everyone in the room. "Yes. Yes, Eleanor. We've all read the fine print. 30 days, a month, an eternity." He finally looked at June, and the mask of casual arrogance slipped for a fractional second, revealing something colder, hungrier. "You get to keep the mausoleum on Broadway. I hope the silence suits you." June met his gaze. Her own hands were folded calmly on the table. Her simple diamond wedding band, a modest heirloom from her grandmother, the only jewelry she'd insisted on wearing today, felt like a lead weight. "I've always appreciated quiet, Richard," she said. "It allows one to think clearly." He barked a short, humorless laugh. "Think all you want, June. The thinking is done. The doing begins now." He pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping on the hardwood. "If we're finished with the theater, we are." Eleanor's voice cut through the air. "My client has no further business with you today." "Perfect." Richard stood, adjusting his cuffs. He didn't look at June again. "Finch, send the paperwork to my new address. The one on Filbert Street," he said. The address was delivered with a deliberate, smug emphasis. It was in Pacific Heights, one of the most exclusive, most expensive streets in San Francisco. A street where she had grown up and where he had never belonged. He was out the door without a backward glance, his footsteps echoing down the hall of the prestigious Vance Crowe offices. The room fell silent for a long moment. Arthur Finch cleared his throat, avoiding June's eyes as he packed his briefcase. "A clean break, June. It's for the best." He scurried out, a rat fleeing a sinking ship that had, in reality, already been scuttled by its captain. Eleanor waited for the door to click shut. Then she let out a slow breath. "He's a fool. An arrogant, simpering fool." "He's a thief," June corrected, her voice quiet but unwavering. She unclasped her hands, noticing they were trembling. She willed them to stop. "And he believes he's gotten away with it." Eleanor's lips thinned. "The 30-day review period is a vulnerability. He could cause trouble. File motions. Drag it out. He's spiteful enough." "He'll be distracted," June said, standing and walking to the floor-to-ceiling window. 40 stories below, the financial district of San Francisco teemed with ant-like life. She found the black town car idling at the curb. The rear door opened and Richard slid in. A moment later, the other door opened, and a slim figure in a cream-colored trench coat with a flash of long blonde hair ducked inside. Samantha, June stated. A simple fact. The car pulled away, merging into the traffic on Montgomery Street. Eleanor came to stand beside her. Do you want to initiate phase 1? Now, June watched the car until it disappeared from view. A memory, sharp and unbidden, sliced through her composure. 3 years ago, Richard's home office. He'd left his email open on the shared desktop, rushing to a critical investor dinner. A dinner he'd told her was men only. The subject line caught her eye. RSVP Bliss. It was from Samantha Lell, his executive assistant. The body was brief. The suite is booked. Can't wait to see you there. P.S. The champagne you like is already on ice. Her heart had been a cold, hard stone in her chest. She'd clicked view entire conversation. The thread went back months. Flirtation, innuendo, then explicit planning. A weekend at the Post Ranch, vague references to distracting June with spa days. A joke about the old money not knowing how the new money plays. She hadn't confronted him. Confrontation was for people who had something to gain or something to lose that they couldn't afford to. Instead, she closed the browser, walked to her own study, and made 2 calls. The first was to Eleanor Vance. The second was to a discreet, exquisitely expensive private investigation firm recommended by her family's head of security. The investigation had yielded more than an affair. It had uncovered a spiderweb of financial deceit, funneled funds from her holding company, June Holdings LLC, into shell corporations, inflated invoices to contractors who didn't exist, loans taken against her assets. With her forged signature, Richard wasn't just cheating on his wife, he was systematically looting her inheritance. The Sterling family fortune, built over 4 generations in shipping, railroads, and more recently, tech venture capital. He'd married June Sterling, the quiet, bookish heiress, thinking he'd found a beautiful, pliable vault. He'd mistaken her reserve for stupidity, her kindness for weakness. June? Eleanor prompted gently. June blinked, the past receding. The cold fury that had sustained her for 3 years was now a focused, humming energy. She reached into her purse, not for a compact or a lipstick, but for a sleek, matte black phone with no visible brand, a satellite phone, encrypted, untraceable. She typed a single pre-drafted code and hit send. Phoenix Protocol, she murmured. Initiate sequence alpha, timestamp 1407 PST, OJS, Omega. The message vanished into the ether. It's done, June said, turning from the window. The San Francisco skyline, her city, spread out before her. The review period is irrelevant. He won't have access to anything to litigate with by nightfall. Eleanor allowed herself a small, grim smile. The board Michael is standing by. The emergency meeting is convened for 4 p.m. The votes are secured, and the repossession team is already en route to the locations of the LaFerrari, the Bugatti, and the vintage Aston Martin. The cards will be declined on his next attempted transaction. June picked up her own classic Birkin bag, another inheritance from her mother. It felt solid, real, a talisman. He's on his way to buy her a house, Eleanor, she said. With my money today. Eleanor's smile faded, replaced by professional admiration. You're sure? Pacific Heights. Surprise, June said. He mentioned it to his broker while he thought I was sleeping last week. June walked toward the door, her posture straight, an heir to a dynasty walking to claim her birthright. Let's see how surprised he is. Down in the town car, Richard Thorne was laughing, his arm around Samantha Lell. You're going to die when you see it, Sammy. 6 bedrooms, 8 baths, a view of the Golden Gate that will make you weep. The listing agent is meeting us there. We'll make an offer today. All cash. Samantha nestled against him, her manicured hand on his thigh. All cash, Richard? That's... What did the Dragon Lady leave you with? More than enough, Richard said, his voice dripping with contempt. The prenup was ironclad, But she's sentimental and stupid. The liquid assets in the joint accounts are massive, plus my CEO compensation package. Let's just say I've been planning for this day for a long time. He leaned in, whispering against her hair. By the time that dried-up lawyer of hers finishes parsing the paperwork, we'll be living in a palace, and I'll have moved half the funds to the Caymans. What about the company? Samantha asked, a flicker of concern in her blue eyes. June Holdings, please. The board loves me. I'm the one who doubled the VC returns. She's just a name on the letterhead, he scoffed. They'll beg me to stay on as CEO, and if they don't, he shrugged. I've had offers. Silicon Valley is littered with startups that would kill for my Rolodex. The car climbed the steep hill into Pacific Heights, passing mansions set behind imposing gates. Richard felt a surge of triumph. This was it. The pinnacle. He'd escaped the gilded cage of the Sterling name, taken what he needed, and was about to claim his rightful kingdom with a beautiful young queen by his side. June, with her quiet dinners and her charity galas and her dusty family portraits, was already a ghost. The town car pulled up to a set of ornate iron gates. A handsome man in a sharp suit stood beside a polished silver sign that read, "Exclusive showing by appointment." The house behind him was a French chateau-style masterpiece, all limestone and slate roofs. "This is it, baby," Richard said, kissing Samantha soundly. "Home." He stepped out of the car, adjusting his suit jacket. The real estate agent, a man named Chad with a blinding smile, extended a hand. "Mr. Thorne, a pleasure. You're going to adore this property. It's truly one of a kind. Let's see it," Richard said, his voice booming with confidence. He slipped his hand into his pocket, pulling out a thin titanium card. The app connected, and a single, stark number greeted him, $27,458.19. Richard stared at the screen, his breath catching in his throat. It couldn't be right. A system error. A temporary glitch. He refreshed, his thumb trembling. The number remained. He checked another app, for the satellite company he'd launched with June's seed money, the one he'd promised to make a tech giant. His personal brokerage account, 8,154. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text message from Eleanor Vance. Phoenix Protocol complete. All Sterling family assets have been frozen and transferred to secure escrow accounts, effective immediately. You have been officially disassociated from all Sterling Holdings LLC finances. All previously authorized lines of credit and joint accounts are now void. Further communication will be handled through custodial legal counsel. Do not attempt to access any Sterling property or funds. Attempting to do so will be considered a violation of the court order and will have severe legal ramifications. Enjoy your new beginning, Richard. Richard's vision tilted, the opulent foyer swimming before him. The Italian marble seemed to warp and twist. The cascading light from the crystal chandelier felt like an interrogation lamp. Samantha's grip on his arm was a painful vice. "What's happening, Richard?" Her voice was no longer breathless awe. It was laced with a growing unease. Her blue eyes, once brimming with calculation, were now wide with a dawning, chilling fear. Richard finally managed to find his voice, but it was reduced to a hoarse whisper, alien to the booming confidence of moments before. It's a mistake. A misunderstanding. They can't do this." He fumbled with his phone again, desperately trying to open another banking app, another account. They all showed the same devastating emptiness. The all cash he'd so smugly boasted about was now a phantom, a mirage. Chad the agent watched them with a practiced, detached expression, his tablet still in his hand. He'd seen fortunes rise and fall like the tide in this neighborhood. The awe on Richard's and Samantha's faces had curdled into something else entirely. "Mr. Thorne," Chad said, his voice still unnervingly calm. "I really do need verified funds to proceed with the intent to purchase. The seller will not consider an offer based on promises." Richard looked at Chad, then at Samantha, her face pale as untouched limestone. The grand chateau, his fortress of success, now felt like a gilded cage. The vaulted ceilings mocked him. The sweeping staircase was a monument to his downfall. The panoramic view, once a symbol of his anticipated dominion, was now the bitter panorama of his ruin. He had planned for this day for a long time. He just hadn't planned for June. He forced a laugh, a brittle, pathetic sound. Of course, a slight delay. Bureaucracy, you know how it is. He tried to regain his composure, but the words tasted like ash in his mouth. He looked at Samantha, forcing a smile that felt like it would crack his face. Don't worry, Sammy. We'll find another place. Plenty of houses for sale, right, Chad? Just not this one. Samantha finally pulled her hands away, her nails leaving faint red marks on his suit sleeve. Her eyes, no longer filled with awe, were now filled with a cold, hard appraisal that was far more terrifying than June's quiet contempt. "Richard," she said, her voice dangerously low, "what fresh hell is this?" Richard Thorne, once poised to claim his nouveau riche kingdom, found himself standing in a magnificent empty foyer, with no money, no houses, and a queen who was rapidly realizing she'd backed the wrong king. The gates of his new life were indeed closing, but not in triumph. They were slamming shut on a trap. Richard stared straight ahead, the vibrant chaos of San Francisco a blur outside the car window. He had no answer. The reality of his situation was a crushing weight, suffocating him. He was a man who had built his life on a foundation of borrowed prestige and stolen wealth, and now, the true owner had returned to reclaim what was hers. I don't know," he finally managed, his voice barely a whisper. We'll figure something out." Samantha finally turned to him, her face a mask of cold disbelief. "Figure something out? Richard, you promised me a life beyond my wildest dreams. You promised me this house, this view." She gestured vaguely towards the windows with a hand that no longer trembled with excitement, but with a brittle anger. "Now what? We sleep on the street?" The driver, a stoic man who had clearly heard it all, kept his eyes on the road. The silence in the car was deafening, punctuated only by the hum of the engine and the frantic beating of Richard's own heart. "This is June's doing," Richard said, more to himself than to Samantha. She's making a point. It's a power play. She can't just take everything." But even as he said it, a cold dread settled in his stomach. June was not one for petty tantrums. She was methodical, calculating, and, he now realized with sickening clarity, utterly ruthless. He pulled out his phone again, a reflex born of desperation. He scrolled through his contacts, his fingers moving numbly over the screen. His friends, the ones he'd boasted to about his impending wealth, his grand new acquisition. What would they say now? He couldn't even reach them. His email was dead, his voicemail non-existent. He saw the contact for Sterling Family Office, a name that had once represented access to an empire. He tapped it, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. Perhaps there was someone there who could intervene, someone who could explain this madness. Could not connect to server. His hope died a swift, brutal death. Samantha let out a small, humorless laugh. "Sterling Family Office? I imagine they've also received instructions to disconnect your lines, Richard. Just like your access to everything else." She looked at the opulent mansions they passed, houses that represented the dreams of so many, now taunting reminders of his own shattered aspirations. "You built your empire on June's resources, didn't you? And she's just taken it all back." Richard couldn't deny it. He could only stare at the digital graveyard of his financial life on his phone screen. The Grand Pacific Heights mansion, the flashiest of his trophies, now a symbol of his monumental fall. The cars, the credit cards, the bank accounts, all mere illusions, granted and revoked at June's will. "Where are we going?" Samantha repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. Richard finally looked at her, really looked at her. The ambition that had once shone in her eyes had been replaced by a grim, hard pragmatism. He saw not a partner in his grand scheme, but a potential liability. I need to think," he stammered. "There must be. I need to call some people. People who owe me favors." He knew, even as he said it, that it was a hollow promise. He had built his favors on a foundation of financial leverage, now rendered useless. The car turned onto Broadway, the familiar cityscape now feeling alien and hostile. He saw his building in the distance, the one with the secure garage, the place where his cars, were being towed away. The humiliation of it all was a bitter pill. "Favors?" Samantha scoffed. "Who owes you favors, Richard? The people you bribed? The ones you threatened? Because I have a feeling those favors are about to expire, just like everything else." Richard slumped back in the seat, the leather cool against his suddenly clammy skin. He was no longer Richard Thorne, the titan of industry and soon-to-be owner of a mansion that cost more than most people would earn in a lifetime. He was just Richard, a man with no money, no access, and a very angry woman beside him who had hitched her wagon to a falling star. He closed his eyes, trying to conjure a solution, a way out of this rapidly unfolding disaster. But all he saw was June's cool, intelligent gaze, her quiet confidence as she orchestrated his downfall. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that this was only the beginning. The Phoenix Protocol, as Eleanor Vance had so chillingly termed it, was in full effect. He had been burned, utterly and completely, and from the ashes, June was rising, leaving him to smolder. June Sterling stood at the heart of her meticulously constructed storm, a calm eye in the hurricane of Richard Thorne's financial and social ruin. The room, steeped in the history of her family's empire, was now a war room from which she waged a battle for her legacy. The ghosts of Charles Sterling's lessons echoed in her mind. Never let them see you sweat. She was sweating, internally, but her outward composure was a shield, a weapon. Her gaze flickered between the monitors, each one a window into the unfolding chaos she had orchestrated. Chad, the realtor, was a mere prop in the scene, his own ambition now overshadowed by the dramatic implosion of his star client's life. Richard's rigid shoulders, his strained voice picking up every failed transaction, it was a symphony of his demise. The blinking red dot on the GPS tracker, a digital representation of his desperate flight towards the illusion of sanctuary at June Holdings, was a satisfyingly tangible sign of his panic. The cascading green checkmarks on the asset recovery status dashboard were a testament to the efficiency of her team. Every legal, financial, and logistical hurdle had been anticipated and cleared. The frozen accounts, the repossessed vehicles, the revoked digital access, each step a calculated blow, delivered with surgical precision. The residential lease rescinded, a final severing of any potential lifeline. As her eyes moved to the Phoenix Protocol Phase 2 column, red and amber entries seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. Press release, CEO transition, SEC whistleblower package release, and the chilling SFPD DA briefing evidence packet. This was not about mere revenge, it was about dismantling Richard's life piece by piece, ensuring his complete and utter erasure from the world he had so audaciously attempted to exploit. The faces on the video call were her generals, each a master of their domain. Eleanor Vance, her attorney, a woman of grim satisfaction, the architect of the legal framework. Michael Chen, the interim CEO, calm and alert. ready to assume command and shepherd the board through the expected formalities. Lionel Shaw, head of security and intelligence, his weary, intelligent face a mask of professional detachment as he monitored Thorne's every move, noting his agitation and the fracturing alliance with Samantha Lell. And David Park, the brilliant CTO, his fingers a blur over keyboards, a digital alchemist uncovering every hidden transaction, every encrypted secret. The audit script is flagging encrypted files and hidden partitions, David reported, his voice matter of fact. Mirroring of his personal devices is complete. We have every text, email, and search query from the last 3 years. The sheer volume of data, the intimate details of Richard's deception, were laid bare, a testament to his hubris and June's foresight. June took another slow sip of the Macallan, the rich, smoky flavor a stark contrast to the cold calculus of her actions. The humiliated wife, the betrayed partner. That woman was a ghost, locked away. The woman speaking was the chairwoman, the inheritor of a legacy, the principal wronged. The speed and precision are commendable, she stated, her voice even, betraying none of the righteous fury that simmered beneath the surface. This was not just about a personal betrayal, it was about the desecration of her family's trust, the endangerment of her company's future. Michael's report further solidified her control. Old man Henderson grumbled about procedure, but when I showed him the preliminary figures from David's audit, he went pale. The embarrassment of the other board members, their eagerness to be seen acting decisively, guaranteed a unanimous vote. Good, June murmured, her gaze returning to the GPS tracker. The red dot is approaching the June Holdings Tower. Lionel's impassive response regarding Samantha Lell was chillingly accurate. Lell is a classic opportunist. Her emotional investment is in his financial viability, her financials. We also have the recordings from the Post Ranch. She's vulnerable. She's also angry. Angry people make mistakes. Lionel's charge was clear. Keep Lell contained, use her vulnerabilities against her, ensure she became another pawn in June's strategic maneuverings. David's explanation of the money trail was a clinical dissection of Richard's greed. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, failing crypto startups, laundered money for organized crime. It was textbook embezzlement and wire fraud, a masterpiece of financial perfidy that would both sate the SEC and the U.S. Attorney's Office, and further implicate Richard in a far more dangerous web. Send the package to Eleanor and Lionel, June commanded, her voice hardening. Well, decide on the timing of the submission. I want him to feel the walls closing in from all directions before the feds knock on his door. The mention of the Organized Crime Task Force, the link to marijuana trafficking, added a layer of calculated brutality. Richard had not just stolen from her. He had carelessly entangled himself with dangerous elements, elements that could now be turned against him. She paused, the silence in the room amplifying the weight of her next words. This was not just about Richard's financial crimes. It was about a deeper betrayal, one that struck at the very heart of her family's legacy. The thought of the funds being used to launder proceeds for arms traffickers sent a cold knot of revulsion through her. And the other matter, the one with the heavier contacts, she began, her eyes fixed on the screen, on the approaching red dot, on the man who had underestimated her at every turn. The war was far from over, but the tide had irrevocably turned. Richard Thorne was about to learn the true meaning of consequence. Our intelligence provides the final connection between the funds and the known players involved. They are poised for action but will await our signal. They understand this is part of a larger civil and domestic conflict, implying they would allow her to strike first. This means Richard was not merely facing financial ruin and public disgrace, he was also looking at a RICO indictment. June had made her decision months prior. When Lionel's operatives uncovered the link, she vowed to use every resource, even the basest, to crush him. This was not solely about retribution, it was about ensuring he could never inflict harm again. "Hold the signal," June commanded, "for now." At that moment, the left monitor flickered. The GPS marker had stopped at the June Holdings building. A new window opened, displaying a live feed from the building's opulent marble lobby. The camera, positioned high in a corner, offered a bird's-eye perspective. Richard Thorne burst in, his suit jacket billowing, his face a contorted mask of fury and indignation. Samantha Lell followed a few steps behind, arms crossed, her expression a turbulent mix of fear and rage. June leaned forward, her drink momentarily forgotten. The drama was escalating into its second act. June Holdings Tower. 3:45 p.m. Richard bypassed the main reception, heading directly for the bank of private elevators leading to the executive floors. His face was recognized. His presence was authority. Or it had been just 3 hours earlier. He reached for the security panel, placing his thumb on the scanner. A red light flashed. Access denied. He tried again, pressing harder. Access denied. "What the hell?" he muttered. He tapped his employee ID against the RFID reader. Nothing. A security guard, a large, impassive man named Rodriguez, whom Richard had encountered countless times, approached. "Mr. Thorne, sir." "Rodriguez, my biometrics aren't working. There's a glitch. Let me up." Rodriguez remained unmoving. "I'm sorry, sir. I have new directives. Your access to the executive floors has been temporarily suspended." "Suspended? By whom?" Richard's voice escalated, drawing the attention of others in the lobby. "I'm the CEO. You work for me. My directives come from the office of the chairwoman and the new interim CEO. Sir, I'm afraid I cannot permit you to pass. You are not on the authorized list for today, new interim CEO." The words struck Richard like a blow to the gut. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to have it confirmed by a low-paid security guard in a public space. Rage, hot and blinding, surged through him. "Call Michael Chen, call Eleanor Vance, call someone with a damn brain and get this sorted out now." Samantha had caught up, hovering behind him, her face flushed with humiliation. "Richard, for God's sake," she hissed. He ignored her. "I have a board meeting in 15 minutes. I demand to be escorted upstairs." Rodriguez's stance shifted subtly. It was no longer politely obstructive, it was firm. "The board meeting is in progress. Sir, it commenced at 3:30 p.m., and you are not on the attendee list." He touched his earpiece. "We have a situation at the executive elevators requesting additional support. In progress." Richard's mind reeled. They had started early. They had locked him out and begun without him. The sheer audacity, the utter disrespect, ignited a fire within him. He took a step forward. "Get out of my way." Rodriguez moved to block him. A solid wall of navy uniform. "Sir, I am going to have to ask you to leave the premises. You are currently not an employee of June Holdings and are trespassing on private property." Not an employee. The words echoed in the vast, cavernous lobby. People were openly staring now. Junior associates, consultants, visitors. He noticed phones being subtly raised. He was becoming a spectacle, a meme in the making. Ousted CEO escorted out. "You listen to me, you glorified doorman!" Richard spat, jabbing a finger towards Rodriguez's chest. "I built this company. I doubled its value. That woman upstairs, that ice-cold—" "She doesn't know the first thing about running a business. She's a trust fund parasite, and you're taking orders from her." His voice boomed. The lobby had fallen silent. Samantha took a step back, distancing herself. 2 more security guards appeared, flanking Rodriguez. "Mr. Thorne," Rodriguez stated, his voice low and even, "this is your final warning. Leave peacefully or we will be forced to escort you out." The reality of his powerlessness descended like a heavy weight. He was outnumbered. He was disgraced. He was broke. The towering, gleaming monument to success surrounding him was no longer his domain. It was a cage he was being ejected from. His shoulders slumped. The fight ebbed away, replaced by a cold, sickening dread. He took a stumbling step back. "This isn't over," he muttered, though the threat sounded pathetic even to his own ears. "Yes, sir," Rodriguez replied tonelessly. "The exit is behind you." Richard turned, his vision blurring with a mix of rage and shame. He saw Samantha, arms wrapped around herself, looking at him not with sympathy, but with cold, appraising disgust, the look one gives a bad investment. He walked towards the immense glass doors, feeling every eye upon him. The whispers began before he was even outside. The doors slid open, and the cool San Francisco afternoon air hit him like a slap. Samantha followed him out, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. The moment they were on the sidewalk, she whirled on him. "What was that?" Each word was a shard of ice. "That was a coup," Richard snarled, pacing a few steps. "A boardroom coup orchestrated by my insane wife, your ex-wife," Samantha corrected, her voice trembling with fury. "As of about 4 hours ago, and it didn't look like a coup. Richard, it looked like you getting fired and thrown out on your ass. What did you do?" "What I had to do to secure our future," he shot back, gesturing wildly at the towering building. "That company was stagnant. I made it grow. I took risks. She's just punishing me for leaving her. She just took everything." "Richard," Samantha's composure fractured. "The cards, the cars, your job, your apartment. I just left my job. My apartment for you. I have nothing. What is your plan?" "I have money," he yelled. "I have accounts she doesn't know about." "Do you?" she screamed back. A passerby glanced at them and hurried on. "Because it didn't look like it back in that $20 million closet. It looked like a man who's completely broke." The word broke hung in the air between them. It was the ultimate obscenity in their world. Richard's phone buzzed in his pocket. He fumbled for it, a desperate hope flaring. Perhaps it was Finch, the lawyer with a solution. Perhaps it was a banker calling to say it was all a mistake. It was a news alert. Business Insider. Breaking. June Holdings CEO Richard Thorne ousted amidst financial irregularities probe. Michael Chen named interim CEO. He stared at the screen. It was public. The article would be spreading through every financial news service, every gossip column. His reputation, his carefully crafted image as the brilliant, self-made steward of an old fortune, was evaporating in real time. Samantha saw the look on his face. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You lied to me. You told me you had it all under control. You told me we were set for life. You're not a billionaire. You're a fraud." She spat the last word. Before he could respond, her own phone rang. She looked at it, her expression shifting from anger to confusion, then to a pale, sickly fear. She answered, "Hello?" A pause. Her eyes widened, flicking to Richard. "What?" "No, that's not possible. There must be a mistake." Another longer pause. Her free hand came up to her mouth. "I see. Yes. Thank you for letting me know." She ended the call, her hand falling limply to her side. "Who was that?" Richard demanded. "That was the head of HR at Burchard Cohen," she said, her voice hollow. The firm where she'd worked before Richard had convinced her to quit to focus on their future. They just received a letter from June Holdings's legal department and the California Bar Association alleging industrial espionage and the theft of trade secrets while I was employed there. They're opening an investigation. They've suspended my professional license pending the outcome." She looked at him, her eyes huge. "They said the evidence was compelling and voluminous. What did you do, Richard? What did you have me do?" He had, in fact, had her download client lists and prospectus information from Bard, a rival investment firm. During her last 2 weeks there, he'd used the data to poach 3 major clients for June Holdings. He had told her it was a harmless competitive intelligence grab. He had promised her it was untraceable. June, she had found out. Indeed, she had found out. And she wasn't just cutting him off. She was systematically dismantling every pillar of his life and taking down anyone who stood too close to him. Samantha took another step back, shaking her head. "I'm not going down with you. Do you understand me? I'm not going to jail for you." "Samantha, wait." "No." The word was final. She turned, flagged a passing taxi with a sharp, desperate wave, and yanked the door open. "Don't call me. Don't come near me. If you ever cared about me at all, you'll leave me alone." She got in and slammed the door. The cab merged into traffic and vanished. Richard stood alone on the sidewalk, the wind cutting through his expensive suit jacket. The sun was beginning to set behind the skyscrapers, casting long, cold shadows. He was 38 years old. An hour ago, he was a CEO, a billionaire by marriage, a man about to purchase a palace for his mistress. Now he was unemployed, penniless, publicly disgraced, possibly facing criminal charges, and utterly alone. His phone buzzed again in his hand. Not an alert this time. A call. The screen flashed a single dreaded word. June. He stared at it, the device feeling like a live grenade. The woman he had spent years manipulating, deceiving, and robbing was calling him 10 minutes after his world had imploded. He didn't answer. He let it ring, the mocking sound a sharp contrast to the city's din, until it went to voicemail. Moments later, it began ringing again and again. Vicinity of June Holdings Tower, 4:30 p.m. The city's ambient noise, the hiss of tires on wet pavement, the distant wail of a siren, the fragmented conversations of passers-by, had become a chaotic symphony to the unraveling of Richard's mind. He stood motionless on the sidewalk, a statue of ruin, as the glass and steel monolith of June Holdings towered over him, a monument to a kingdom that was no longer his. The sun, dipping behind the skyline, painted the building's western face a fiery orange, a cruel, beautiful mockery. His phone had finally stopped ringing. The screen displayed 14 missed calls, all from June. Each unanswered call felt like a suture tearing loose, a stitch of his former reality coming undone. The ensuing silence was worse, a vacuum pulling at the edges of his panic. He couldn't stand here. He was a spectacle. He could feel the glances, the averted eyes, the subtle quickening of pace as people hurried by. The Business Insider alert had likely pinged on every phone within a 5-block radius. Ousted amidst financial irregularities probe. The words were branded on the inside of his skull. He started walking, with no destination in mind. His feet carried him north, away from the financial district, towards the seedier edges of the Tenderloin. The suits and leather briefcases gave way to hoodies and shopping carts. The change in scenery mirrored his internal collapse. Think. You have to think. Money. He needed liquid cash now. The joint accounts were frozen. The credit cards were plastic tombstones. The secret Cayman account was locked. But he was a planner. He had contingencies. He ducked into the grimy alcove of a shuttered pawn shop. The smell of urine and stale beer assaulted his senses. This was a place for desperate men. He was now a desperate man. He pulled out his phone, the sleek titanium device a grotesque anachronism here. He opened a secure messaging app, one that used military-grade encryption. A number was saved under the contact V, Victor, his not-so-legitimate private banker in Zurich, the one who had facilitated the numbered account, the one who asked no questions for a 20% fee. Richard typed, his thumbs clumsy with adrenaline. Emergency. Need immediate liquidity. Wire $500,000 to Standard Drop. Account frozen. He hit send. The message showed a single gray tick. Sent. Not delivered. He stared at it. The tick didn't turn to 2. It didn't show as red. The app required a data connection. He had full bars. He sent a test message to his own other number. It went through instantly. A cold sweat broke out on the back of his neck. He dialed Victor's number directly, a Swiss landline he had memorized. The phone rang once, twice, then a recorded female voice, in crisp, German-accented English. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again. No longer in service. A bank. A point of contact that was supposed to be as permanent as a mountain. Gone. Poof. As if it had never existed. June. It had to be June. But how? How could she possibly have found Victor? The man was a ghost. The connection was shrouded in 3 layers of shell corporations. Unless Victor wasn't a ghost. Unless Victor worked for someone else. The thought was a plunge into an ice bath. Had he been playing in a game where the other side owned the referee, the stadium, and the rulebook? A new alert buzzed on his phone, pulling him from his vertigo. An email from his personal Gmail account. The sender was Nexus Consulting, the dummy corporation he'd created to funnel the money. The blood drained from his face. He opened it. There was no body text, only a single PDF attachment. He tapped it, the file opening slowly on the grimy street. It was a scanned document, a cover page from the United States District Court for the Northern District of California. Seizure warrant in rem. Below it, a list of assets. His eyes scanned the legal jargon, picking out the horrifying highlights. All funds, instruments, and assets held in the name of or for the benefit of Marlin Ventures, a British Virgin Islands entity. All accounts and safe deposit boxes registered to or accessed by Victor J. Greger operating as Private Bank Zurich AG. Safety Deposit Box number 774 held at the San Francisco Safety Deposit Vault Comer under the alias R. Thornfield. His safety deposit box, the one in the basement of the anonymous granite-faced building on Sutter Street. The one that held $200,000 in untraceable bearer bonds, a fake passport, and a handful of flawless diamonds. His true escape hatch. Gone. Seized by court order. The warrant was signed by a federal judge, dated yesterday. They had been moving before the divorce was even final. This wasn't a reaction. It was a coordinated assault. He leaned against the cold, gritty brick wall, the phone slipping in his sweaty hand. The scope of the catastrophe was geometric, expanding faster than his mind could process. It wasn't just about locking him out. It was about systematically deleting him from the financial system, erasing his escape routes, turning his secret stashes into evidence. His phone buzzed again. This time, a call not from June. From a 415 number he didn't recognize, a San Francisco number. Hope, stupid and frail, flickered. Maybe it was Finch, the lawyer. Maybe there was a legal maneuver. Maybe this was all a terrible mistake that could be undone. He answered, bringing the phone to his ear. Hello? His voice was a rasp. Mr. Thorne. A woman's voice. Young, professional, utterly devoid of warmth. So, Richard choked out, the words tasting like ash. You're offering me a deal? You want me to confess to everything, forfeit everything, and disappear? And you won't send me to jail? Precisely. June's voice was smooth, devoid of emotion. You will sign a document prepared by my lawyers that does the following. First, you will irrevocably forfeit any and all claims to any asset, property, or financial instrument acquired during our marriage. This includes explicitly any hidden assets you believe I am unaware of. Second, you will voluntarily resign from all boards and positions associated with Sterling family interests, with a public statement citing personal reasons. Third, you will sign a full confession regarding the financial misconduct at June Holdings, accepting sole responsibility. Richard's breath hitched. A confession? he whispered, the rage he'd felt moments ago replaced by a chilling dread. You want me to go to jail? The confession will be held in escrow, June continued, her tone maddeningly calm as if she hadn't heard him. It will not be released to the authorities unless you violate the terms of our agreement. The primary term is this. You will leave California tonight. You will not contact me, my family, or any associate of June Holdings ever again. You will disappear. Disappear. It sounded like a death sentence, but a quieter one than prison. His heart, which had been a cold stone, gave a feeble thump. And if I do this, what do I get? You get to avoid federal prison. He stared at the amber liquid swirling in the fresh glass of Jack Daniels, the smoke from unseen cigarettes curling around the dim bar. June had thought of everything. Every loophole. Every escape route. She had systematically closed it. He had built his empire on lies and manipulation, believing himself invincible, only to be brought down by the woman he'd underestimated, the woman he'd dismissed as a trophy wife. The power of her legal team, the cold efficiency of her actions, it was overwhelming. She had the forensic reports, the bank records, the recordings with Victor. She had proof of his affair, the staged fishing trips, the invoices for services never rendered. He had been played, expertly and completely. I need time to think, he rasped, his voice barely audible. You have until sunrise, Richard, June replied, her voice softening almost imperceptibly, though it offered no comfort. My lawyers will bring the documents to San Francisco by dawn. You will be at the Fairmont Hotel, Suite 1402. They will wait for you. If you are not there, or if you attempt any further subterfuge, the confession goes to the U.S. Attorney. And do not underestimate me, Richard. I know where you keep your emergency cash. I know about the safety deposit box in Geneva. I know everything. The line went dead. Richard sat there, the drink untouched. The cheers and murmurs of the bar patrons faded into an indistinct hum. He was trapped. He had built a life on a foundation of sand, and the tide had finally come in, washing it all away. He had a choice: prison and utter ruin, or dignified exile. A life lived in the shadows, forever looking over his shoulder. He signaled the bartender for another drink. This one he would savor. He needed to think, to meticulously plan his next and final move. He was Richard Sterling, the man who had it all. By morning, he would be no one, but even a ghost could be a problem. And he wasn't ready to fade away just yet. He was still Richard. And Richard Sterling, even on the brink of oblivion, always had a plan. Richard's heart hammered against his ribs as he watched the service gate swing open. Margot was leaving. Now was his chance. He slipped through the gate, the cool San Francisco air doing little to quell the sweat beading on his forehead. The gate clicked shut behind him, a sound that both reassured and terrified him. He was inside. He moved quickly but quietly along the winding flagstone path, the manicured gardens a stark contrast to the grimy dive bar he'd just left. The house loomed before him, a silent, imposing behemoth. Lights glowed in what he knew were the study and the library, June's domain. He could almost feel her eyes on him, even from a distance. Richard's focus, however, was on the West Wing, specifically his old home office. It was a smaller, more unassuming room, filled with the trappings of his former life. He remembered the exact location of the painting Junlo loathed, a garish abstract, all clashing colors and aggressive lines, hung in a spot he'd chosen for its proximity to his hidden USB drive. He reached the service entrance to the West Wing, his fingers fumbling for the keypad. Margot's birthday, October 15th. He punched in the numbers, each digit a tremor of hope and fear. The lock beeped, and the door clicked open. He was in. The air inside was hushed, still, scented faintly with lemon polish and old money. Every floorboard seemed to creak a protest at his presence. He moved with the stealth of a thief, a role he now understood all too well. He found his office, the painting a ghastly splash of color on the wall. His hands shook as he reached behind it, feeling for the slight give of the taped USB drive. It was there. He peeled it off, the small piece of plastic feeling like a lifeline. He'd done it. He had the leverage. Now, to present it. He returned to the service entrance, his mind already racing with what he would say, how he would twist this unexpected turn of events to his advantage. He just needed a few more hours, a chance to negotiate his escape. As he stepped back outside, the service gate was already starting to close. He lunged, pushing it open just enough to slip through. He glanced back at the house, half expecting to see June standing at a window, her icy gaze fixed upon him. But there was nothing but darkness and the faint glow of distant lights. He walked briskly back towards the waiting taxi, the driver looking at him with a bored expression. Richard slid into the back seat. "Broadway near Devisero," he said, his voice rough. "And step on it." The driver grunted and pulled away from the curb, the meter still running. Richard leaned back, the cool feel of the USB drive a tangible weight in his pocket. He looked out at the glittering city lights. A predator now, cornered but not yet defeated. He had one last card to play. And this time, he wouldn't be playing for a rounding error. He'd be playing for his freedom. The service door swung open and Margot emerged, clad in a practical coat, a capacious tote bag slung over her shoulder. She paused, uttering words to someone inside, likely the evening security guard, before Jorge closed the door behind her. A solid thud confirmed its automatic lock. Richard held his breath. Margot proceeded down the service alley toward the bus stop on the main thoroughfare, her retreating figure diminishing. The security protocol would now enter a brief leniency period, a minute or two before the system fully rearmed for the night, activating motion sensors and internal alarms. This offered a window for Jorge to complete his final rounds. He moved with haste. 1-0-1-5. He entered the sequence into the worn keypad. A green indicator illuminated, accompanied by a soft click. He eased the heavy door open just enough to slip into the familiar, dimly lit service corridor, redolent of lemon polish and laundry detergent. He closed it soundlessly behind him. He was now in the heart of the adversary's stronghold. He understood the house's patterns. Jorge's initial sweep would cover the ground floor living areas, followed by the perimeter. Richard had approximately 5 minutes. He proceeded with stealth, his dress shoes making no sound on the plush runner, past the immaculate kitchen, through the butler's pantry, and into the main hallway. The residence was quiet, expansive, and overwhelmingly familiar. Portraits of stern-faced Sterling ancestors appeared to regard him with contempt. The home office was situated on the second floor. At the front of the house, he opted for the rear stairs, the narrow, carpeted servant staircase. Ascending 2 steps at a time, he entered the second-floor hallway. A faint outline of light escaped from beneath the door of the master bedroom suite at the far end. Her chamber now. Was she inside? His pulse hammered in his ears. He ducked into the office, gently closing the door behind him. The room was dark, illuminated solely by the city lights filtering through the tall windows. He refrained from turning on a lamp. He went directly to the far wall, to the large, unappealing painting, a chaotic assemblage of red and black hues contributed by a promising artist friend of June's. He detested it. He had preserved it for this precise purpose. With delicate fingers, he lifted the substantial frame from the wall and placed it face down on the plush Persian rug. There, affixed to the cardboard backing, was a small black USB drive, no larger than a thumbnail. He detached it, the adhesive yielding with a soft rip that resonated like a gunshot in the stillness. In the quiet, he inserted the drive into his trouser pocket, his heart thudding against his ribs. He possessed it. He lifted the painting to reposition it. As he did, his gaze fell upon the desk. Jin's desk. Orderly, organized, a single closed laptop, a framed photograph of her parents, and adjacent to it, a familiar matte black satellite phone, the very device she had used to initiate the Phoenix Protocol, the one linking to Lionel Shaw, to her private network, the ultimate gateway to her command center. A daring, audacious notion seized him. If the USB drive was a scalpel, that phone represented a bomb. What did it contain? Communications, directives, evidence of her own clandestine activities. If he could acquire it, he would not merely possess leverage, he would wield the power to dismantle her entire operation. He could expose her methodologies, perhaps even uncover illicit activities. He could reverse the situation. He crossed the room in 2 swift strides. He reached for the phone. "I wouldn't do that." Richard, the voice, cool and arid as a desert breeze, emanated from the doorway. He froze, his hand mere inches from the phone. Slowly, he turned. June stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the hall's illumination. She was still attired in the elegant, understated navy dress she had worn to the signing, but had removed her heels. She appeared smaller, yet infinitely more commanding. In her hand, she held a substantial crystal tumbler, the one from the study. He observed her take a small sip, her eyes never deviating from his face. They were not the eyes of a woman who had been weeping. They were the eyes of a surgeon meticulously assessing a tumor. "How?" he began, but the word faltered in his throat. "How did I know you'd seek the drive behind that dreadful Klein painting?" She completed his question. "Because I've been aware of it for 8 months, Richard. Lionel's operatives scoured the residence for listening devices after we uncovered the deception. They discovered yours. A remarkably sophisticated battery-powered model. I allowed it to remain. I wished to observe what you valued sufficiently to conceal within my own home." She shook her head, a gesture signifying profound disappointment. "Councilman Ramirez. Really? You imagine threatening a minor corrupt politician would compel me? My brother-in-law's company has already been dissolved. Ramirez is presently undergoing interviews with the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. The evidence you so obligingly preserved was handed over this afternoon. He will be far too preoccupied with self-preservation to be of any assistance to you. Indeed, he is likely identifying you as the source of the bribe at this very moment." Richard felt the ground vanish beneath him. The USB drive in his pocket was now merely a piece of plastic. Worthless, a snare into which he had blundered. "You are monitoring the house," he whispered, the full scope of her surveillance dawning upon him. "Of course, the motion sensors in this room alerted me the instant you crossed the threshold. I was merely next door." She advanced a step into the room. "You were consistently so predictable. Richard, you operate with a linear, avaricious mindset. When confronted, you pursue the hidden cache, the clandestine weapon. You are incapable of conceiving a strategy that does not involve a stratagem, a deception, an undisclosed advantage." The fury resurfaced, scorching away the remnants of his fear. "And you? What is your plan, June? To assume the role of the avenging angel? You possess no righteousness. You are merely a privileged individual whose sentiments were wounded and who is utilizing her father's wealth to stage a tantrum." A fleeting expression, perhaps pain, crossed her face with such rapidity he might have mistaken it. It was supplanted by a cold, glacial composure. "This issue transcends my feelings. This concerns justice and equilibrium. You took. Now you relinquish all." "I provided you with everything," he bellowed, the sound absorbed by the heavy draperies and books. "I granted you a life. I rendered you significant. You were an antiquated museum exhibit before my arrival." Now she smiled, a thin, terrifying curve of her lips. "You gave me falsehoods. You inflicted betrayal. You bestowed upon me the invaluable revelation of your true nature, and for that, I suppose I must express my gratitude." She placed her glass on a side table with a precise click. "Now you face a decision. You can depart from this location, proceed to Eleanor's office, execute the documents, and board an aircraft. Or you can remain, and I shall contact the SFPD to report a home invasion by my violent, unstable, and recently disgraced ex-husband. Given the restraining order I submitted this afternoon, and the fact that you are trespassing with evident intent, pilfering that drive, attempting to abscond with my phone, I anticipate the response will be swift and not particularly gentle, which will render your eventual encounter with the federal authorities considerably more problematic." A restraining order. She had anticipated every contingency. He was once again ensnared. The confines of the elegant, detested room seemed to constrict around him. "You triumph," he spat. The words tasted of venom. "Are you content? You have annihilated me. You prevail." "I am not content, Richard," she stated. And for the first time her voice conveyed weariness. "I am finished. Now, depart from my residence." He remained stationary for a considerable duration, paralyzed by impotent fury. Then, his shoulders sinking in defeat, he turned and exited through the door, not daring to look back. He retraced his path down the rear stairs, through the silent service corridor, and pushed open the service door. The night air bit with cold. The taxi remained, idling, its meter a glowing green testament to his mounting financial distress. As he walked toward it, his phone vibrated. A new email from Eleanor Vance. Subject: Documents for review and signing, urgent. Attached were the confession, the forfeiture agreement, the non-disclosure clause, the very blueprint for his ruin. He entered the taxi. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Where to now?" Chief Richard provided the address of the Vance Crowe offices. As the cab departed, he looked back at the Sterling mansion. A light flickered on in a third-floor window, a room he had never paid much heed to, a sitting room. He observed a figure, slender and upright, cross the illuminated space. June, watching his departure. He turned away, facing forward into the darkness. An uncertain night. The unraveling was absolute. The empire he had strived to construct had vanished. The persona he had adopted had dissolved. Nothing remained but a signature on paper and the desolate, extended road leading nowhere. Downtown San Francisco. 7:45 p.m. The taxi felt like a vehicle of penance, the meter's incessant ticking. The digital cricket that marked his final moments of independence had crossed the 60-year mark. The driver's radio softly played a melancholy country tune about lost journeys. The soundtrack was so cloying it seemed mocking or improvised by June herself. Richard stared sightlessly at the flickering neon lights and streetlights. The USB drive felt like dead weight in his pocket. June's ghostly image in the doorway remained imprinted on his retina. "You were always so predictable." Her words were the final nails in his coffin. He had fallen right into the trap, a mouse lured by the flickering bait into a spring-loaded mouth. The city councilman's gamble had failed. The driver. He was worthless. He had nothing. No, worse than nothing. He had accumulated debts. Samantha had left, probably seeking legal help. The FBI was investigating Ramirez. The Securities and Exchange Commission was gathering evidence that, as it now became clear, was extensive and incriminating. And June held the trigger. The car pulled up to the elegant dark building where Vance Crowe lived. Richard's hand hovered over the doorknob. As soon as he stepped out, as soon as he rode the elevator to the 40th floor, it would all be over. He would renounce his existence, a ghost with a price tag. "That'll be $68.50, said the driver, turning in his seat. Richard met his gaze in the mirror. I don't have it. My accounts are frozen." The driver's weary expression hardened. You've got to be kidding me. You said there was an extra 50. I know what I said. It's been a complicated day. The understatement of the century. He fumbled through his pockets, turning them inside out like a character in a comedy, revealing only lint and the USB drive. His watch. A Patek Philippe. A gift from June for their 3rd anniversary. Worth over 100,000. Take this. He started unbuckling his belt. The driver snorted. I don't want your fake watch, buddy. I want the 6850. It's not a fake. It's the real thing. It's worth a fortune. Yeah, and I'm the King of England. Get out now before I call the police. Defeated even by a taxi driver. Richard stumbled onto the curb. The driver leaned over, shouting through the passenger window, "Deadbeat!" before peeling away from the curb, leaving Richard standing in the gust of its exhaust. He looked up at the tower. The lights of the Vance Crowe offices glowed on the upper floors. Eleanor was waiting up there with the documents. Time was running out. 7:52 p.m. His phone buzzed. Not a call. A calendar notification. Reminder. Dinner with investors. Progress. 8 p.m. A dinner he had arranged months prior. A table for 6. He was supposed to be there now, sipping a cocktail, exuding confidence, finalizing a funding round for a new biotech venture. The life that was intended for him. The life now belonging to someone else. The sheer absurdity of it overwhelmed him, a hysterical bubble rising in his throat. He was meant to choose between a 5-star meal and signing a confession that would exile him from civilized society. He emitted a sound that was part laugh, part sob, drawing a concerned glance from a well-dressed couple entering the building. He did not enter. Instead, he turned and began to walk, driven by a primal, panicked need to move, to avoid being in that lobby when the clock struck 8. His feet carried him westward towards the water, towards the one place in the city that had ever felt neutral. A place that belonged neither to his former poverty nor his ill-gotten luxury, the waterfront near Fisherman's Wharf. The tourist commotion was a welcome respite. The crowds, the shrieking seagulls, the aroma of fried dough and salt water. It was a sensory onslaught that drowned out the cacophony in his mind. He pushed past families clutching oversized stuffed animals, past street performers, past stalls displaying inexpensive trinkets. He walked until the commercial frenzy yielded to the quieter, darker piers where fishing boats bobbed on the inky water. He found a deserted bench on a pier. The wood was damp and cold. The city glittered across the bay. A galaxy of lights that had once shimmered with promise. Now it resembled a distant, hostile planet, the Golden Gate Bridge, its towers illuminated against the night sky. No longer a symbol of grandeur, but a barrier, a gate from which he was being expelled. He retrieved his phone. The screen displayed a ledger of his downfall. Missed calls, 22 from June, the last one over an hour ago. He opened his email. Another message from Eleanor. Timestamp 7:55 p.m. Subject, urgent, your decision. The body of the message was a single line. June is awaiting confirmation. The 8 p.m. deadline is firm. It was 8:07 p.m. He was already late. The offer, she had stated, expired at 8:01. He had defaulted. He had chosen imprisonment through indecision. A cold, fatalistic calm descended upon him. So be it. If he was to fall, he would fall fighting. He would make one final call. Not to plead, not to negotiate, but to convey his exact sentiments to her. To pour every ounce of venom, every shred of bitterness into her ear. To deny her the satisfaction of his silent capitulation. He accessed her contact. He stared at the name. June. For years, that name had served as an access code, unlocking vaults. Now it was a target. His thumb hovered over the call button. Rage, hot and pure, surged through his veins, burning away the fear, the shame, the calculation. He pressed it. It rang once, twice, then her voice, cool and unsurprised. "Richard, you're late." The calmness in her tone was the final spark. The dam burst. "You wish to discuss lateness?" he snarled, his voice trembling with the intensity of his fury. "I'm tardy to the gala you hosted in my honor, the kick Richard while he's down extravaganza. Well, here I am, June, the guest of dishonor. Are you pleased now? Seated in your opulent palace, counting your fortunes, observing my life combust on your surveillance monitors. Does it bring you gratification?" There was a pause. He could discern her breathing, slow and steady. "I outlined the terms. You elected not to accept them." "Accept them?" He laughed, an ugly sound. "You presented me with a choice between a firing squad and decapitation. That is not a choice. It is a sadistic game. You are not some righteous crusader. You are a vindictive, heartless individual who cannot tolerate the fact that someone finally perceived your true nature, an empty, frigid facade, and desired something genuine." The words spilled forth, a torrent of poison he had been accumulating for years. "Do you imagine this is about wealth, about embezzlement? Please, this concerns your ego. You are pathetic. Your fragile ego could not withstand it. I had no desire to spend the remainder of my life venerating at the shrine of Saint June of the Trust Fund. I rendered you interesting. I provided you with a life beyond charity events and museum committees, and you repay me by attempting to annihilate me. You are a monster, a meticulously attired, well-spoken monster." He began pacing now on the damp pier, the phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesticulating wildly. "And do you know the most amusing part? The most hilariously, tragically ironic part? I loved you once. When I first encountered you, I believed you to be a rare, exquisite entity, untainted. I thought I could be the one to awaken you. But, you know what? I awakened to a calculator with a pulse, a ridiculously overpriced spreadsheet clad in a Diane von Furstenberg dress. Your concept of passion is a balanced portfolio. Your perception of risk is a slightly aggressive municipal bond." He was shouting now, the words tearing at his throat, yet he was indifferent. "So go ahead, transmit your files to the FBI. Ruin me. It will not alter who you are. It will not fill that vast empty house. It will not inspire affection. You will perish in solitude within that mausoleum, surrounded by portraits of deceased individuals who were likely as cold and miserable as you are." He stopped, his chest heaving. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. He had said it all. He had hurled every weapon at his disposal. He awaited her hang-up, the line going dead, but it did not. He heard a soft, almost imperceptible sound, a sharp, quick intake of breath. Then her voice, when it came, was altered. Not cold, not composed. It was quiet, thin, stripped of all its defenses. It was the voice of the woman he had glimpsed years ago, the one he believed he could redeem. "Is that what you perceive?" she whispered. "That I am empty?" The raw vulnerability of it struck him. He had anticipated fury. He saw disdain. Not this. This fragility. It disarmed him. "What? You stated that you loved me once?" she said, the words barely audible above the lapping of the bay water against the pilings. "When?" The question, so simple, so devastating, lodged in his throat. "It matters to me." Her voice gained a trace of strength. "Tell me when." He leaned against a cold metal railing, the fight drained from him, replaced by a bewildered exhaustion. "The beginning, Napa. That weekend at the vineyard. You were different. You laughed. You became sunburned. You didn't discuss dividends or board meetings. You spoke of the soil, the grapes, the history. You seemed authentic." A prolonged silence. He could almost visualize her in the dimly lit study, her glass of whiskey forgotten. I was authentic, she responded, her voice now thick with a pain so profound it felt like a tangible presence on the line. I was happy with you, Richard. I allowed you entry, Richard. I opened the gates, bypassed the lawyers and the security. I gave you the combination to the vault, not merely the funds. Me? He had no reply. The memory felt like a phantom limb, aching. And you know what you did? She continued, the pain curdling into something harder. You took notes. You saw a blueprint. You interpreted my vulnerability as a design flaw. My happiness became a tool. My trust, a lever. You did not awaken to become a spreadsheet, Richard. You transformed a person into one. You itemized me, my connections, my assets, my name, and then you began to skim from the ledger. First my confidence, then my dignity, then my future. June, no. You speak. Now I speak. The steel returned to her voice, but it was brittle, forged in sorrow. You wish to know what fills the house? It is not empty. It is replete with specters. The specter of the man I believed you to be. The specter of the life I imagined we were building. The specter of every aspiration I was foolish enough to entertain. While you were sharing a bed with your assistant, plotting the plunder of my family's legacy. Her voice faltered for a fleeting moment. You did not steal from a company, Richard. You stole from me. You stole the woman I was, and I demand her return. And the only means to reclaim her is to eradicate every trace of you from my existence, commencing with the falsehood of you that still walks the earth. The confession, the raw, unvarnished truth of her anguish, was more terrifying than any legal threat. He had witnessed her anger. He had never witnessed her devastation. And he was responsible. I am sorry, he stammered. The words were utterly insufficient, like dust in a hurricane. Are you? The question cut like a blade. Are you sorry for your actions? Or are you sorry for being discovered? Are you sorry for inflicting pain upon me? Or are you sorry for the depletion of your wealth? He opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. The truth lay like a greasy, shameful weight in his gut. He regretted all of it, but most acutely, he regretted his current predicament on this frigid pier, destitute. She perceived his silence, and within that silence, she found her answer. That is what I presumed. Her voice returned to its flat tone. The moment of vulnerability was sealed over, a wound cauterized. The offer remains on the table, Richard, not out of compassion, but out of expediency. A trial would be convoluted, public. It would tether you to me, to the news. A perpetual reminder. I desire your absence, truly absent. The documents, the transfer, the flight. It is the most straightforward resolution. And the confession, the one I sign, you will hold it perpetually over me? Yes, she affirmed, without a hint of apology. It is your leash, the only one you shall receive. You will behave yourself. You will disappear. You will never contact me or mine again, and it shall remain secured. Should you so much as breathe in my direction, it will be delivered to the authorities. This is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It is probationary parole for a transgression you unequivocally committed. Accept it, or refuse it. But decide now. This is the final occasion we shall converse. The finality was absolute. The last time, the 88th call, the one where all pretense dissolved, where the raw, bleeding truth of their mutual destruction was laid bare. There was no leverage remaining, no hidden card, no stratagem. Only this, an opportunity to flee with a collar around his neck or to be put down. He gazed out at the dark, infinite expanse of the Pacific. A one-way passage somewhere across its vastness. $100,000 to establish a life as a phantom. It was nothing. It was everything. I will sign, he stated, the words tasting of defeat and the salty air. Eleanor is waiting. The car will convey you to SFO. A ticket to Bangkok is secured under the name on the passport you will find in the envelope with the funds. It departs at 11:45. Be on it. Bangkok. A world away. A place to vanish. June. He began, unsure of his intended words. Goodbye. Go to hell. I'm sorry. But the line was already dead. The 88th call had concluded. He stood on the pier for a considerable time, the phone cold in his hand. The city lights glittered, distant and indifferent. The rage had dissipated, consumed by its own inferno. The fear was a dull, constant ache. All that remained was a hollow, yawning void and the faint, terrible comprehension of what he had truly lost and what he had truly been. He turned and commenced the long, slow walk back to Eliza's tower to affix his signature to the dotted line of his own obliteration. Vance Crowe Offices, 8:45 p.m. The silence within Eleanor Vance's corner office was palpable, thick and expensive, akin to the atmosphere in a tomb. The 40th floor vista presented a panoramic postcard of the glittering bay, a view Richard had once felt entitled to a portion of. Now it served merely as a backdrop to his capitulation. Eleanor sat behind her minimalist desk, a monument to polished steel and sharp angles. She offered no smile, no frown. She was a conduit, a human notary. Arrayed before her were 3 documents. Their dense blocks of text formed a prison of legal jargon. The asset forfeiture and release, she began, her voice devoid of all inflection. By signing, you irrevocably waive any and all claims, known or unknown, to any asset, property, financial instrument, or interest acquired during your marriage to June Sterling, or held within any trust, corporation, or entity under her control or beneficial ownership. This includes, but is not limited to, the contents of any and all safety deposit boxes, digital wallets, and offshore accounts previously disclosed or otherwise. She slid a heavy silver pen across the glass desktop. It stopped an inch from his fingers. Richard stared at it. The pen, his signature, the final act of self-annihilation. He picked it up. It was cold. He inscribed his name at the bottom of the 3-page document. The loops of the R and D resembled the bars of a cage. The confidentiality and non-disclosure agreement, Eleanor continued, pushing forward the second stack. In perpetuity, you shall not disclose, discuss, or allude to the terms of your marriage, your divorce, the financial affairs of June Sterling, or the Sterling family, the internal operations of Sterling Holdings, or the circumstances of your departure. This restriction includes communications with the media, in memoirs, in private conversation, or via any digital medium. The penalty for breach is liquidated damages of $50 million, plus injunctive relief, plus the immediate release of the 3rd document to law enforcement. $50 million. A sum that had once been a mere line item, now an insurmountable phantom debt. He signed. The scratch of the pen was the only sound. And finally, Eleanor stated, her voice dropping a fraction, the affidavit of confession. This document is thinner, more lethal. It is a plain-typed statement. No legal jargon, merely facts. Your facts. Richard's eyes scanned the cold, clinical prose. Richard Alistair Thorne, being of sound mind, hereby confess and acknowledge the following. 1. Between the dates of January 2023 and February 2026, I knowingly and willfully diverted funds from Sterling Holdings LLC and associated Sterling family trusts for my personal enrichment using shell corporations, including Nexus Consulting and Marlin Ventures. 2. I conspired with Samantha Lell to conceal an extramarital affair and to misuse corporate resources. 3. I forged the signature of June Sterling on loan documents. 4. I provided false information to the board of directors of Sterling Holdings regarding company performance. It continued. A bullet-pointed roadmap to a federal penitentiary. Every secret, every lie laid bare in black and white. At the bottom, a space for his signature and a line for a notary. A young associate stood silently in the corner, a notary stamp in hand. This document, Eleanor said, will be held in a secure third-party escrow account. Its release is contingent solely upon a breach of the prior agreements or upon a direct written instruction from June Sterling. Do you understand? He understood. He was signing a sword to hang over his own neck. With the wire held by the woman he had betrayed, he signed. The notary stepped forward, stamped the document, and signed with a flourish. The click of the stamp was the sound of a cell door locking. Eleanor gathered the papers, placed them in a sealed envelope, and deposited it in a small, sleek safe behind her desk. She then handed Richard a manila envelope. It was thin. Inside, you will find a passport in the name of David Ree, a debit card linked to a numbered account in Singapore with a balance of 100,000 US dollars, a key to a safety deposit box in the Bangkok airport containing $5,000 in local currency, and a one-way first-class ticket on Thai Airways. Flight 795 departing SFO at 11:45 p.m. for Bangkok. A car is waiting downstairs. The driver will take you directly to the airport. You will not return to your vehicle. You will not attempt to access any personal belongings. Any items you have not taken with you are forfeit. Richard took the envelope. It weighed nothing. It was his entire life now. Is there anything you'd like to say? Eleanor asked. The question clearly a formality. He looked at her, at the city behind her. Tell her, he began, but the words died. What was there to tell her? I'm sorry, was a joke. I hate you, was a weakness. I'll miss you, was the greatest lie of all. Tell her nothing, he finished. Eleanor gave a single slight nod. The car is a black Lincoln Town car, license plate 7XVL292. It's at the private garage entrance on Stevenson Street. Goodbye, Richard. He was dismissed. He turned and walked out of the office, past the empty cubicles, into the elevator. The descent was weightless. A plunge into the underworld. The town car was there, idling. A driver in a black suit and cap stood by the open rear door. He didn't make eye contact. Richard slid inside. The door thudded shut, sealing him in leather-scented silence. The car pulled smoothly into the night. He didn't look back as the financial district receded. He opened the envelope. The passport was a good fake. His photo beside the name David Ree, born in Portland, Maine. The debit card was plain white with a string of numbers. The ticket was real. Bangkok. He knew no one there. He didn't speak the language. It was a black hole. The car merged onto the 101, heading south towards the airport. The lights of the city streamed by, a river of gold flowing in the opposite direction. He was leaving it all. The power, the prestige, the illusion. He felt nothing. He was a shell being transported to a dumping ground. Then his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The deal has changed. Tell the driver to take the next exit. Head to the Golden Gate Bridge Welcome Center. South Lot. Come alone now. June. He stared at the screen, his heart giving a sick, confused lurch. The deal had changed. What did that mean? Had she changed her mind? Was this another trap? A worse one. Stop the car, he said, his voice rough. The driver glanced in the mirror. Sir, take the next exit, change of plan. Go to the Golden Gate Bridge, the South Welcome Center. The driver's eyes met his in the mirror, showing the first flicker of something other than robotic obedience. Uncertainty. My instructions are to take you directly to SFO. Sir, no deviations. Your instructions just changed, Richard snapped, a ghost of his old authority in his tone. Check with your dispatcher now. The driver pulled over onto the shoulder, the car's tires crunching on gravel. He picked up a radio handset, spoke in low tones. A crackled response came back. The driver listened, then nodded. Confirmed. Proceeding to the Golden Gate Bridge. The car pulled back onto the freeway, took the next exit and began winding through the Presidio. The dark shapes of cypress trees looming against the night sky. Confusion and a sliver of mad hope warred in Richard's chest. Why the bridge? Of all places, it was where he'd proposed to her. A cliché, he thought at the time, but she'd loved it. The wind, the view, the sense of possibility. Was this some kind of twisted poetic justice? A final meeting at the beginning. The town car pulled into the nearly empty south parking lot. The bridge itself, lit in a majestic amber glow, soared into the fog that was beginning to creep in from the ocean. The air was cold and damp, smelling of salt and diesel. "Wait here," Richard told the driver. He got out, the manila envelope in his hand. The wind whipped at his suit jacket. He saw a lone figure standing at the railing at the far end of the lot, overlooking the black water of the bay. A woman, slim, erect, her coat collar turned up against the wind. June. He walked towards her, his shoes loud on the asphalt. As he got closer, he saw she wasn't looking at the water. She was looking at him. Her face was pale in the bridge's light, her expression unreadable. He stopped a few feet away. The roar of the wind and the distant hum of traffic on the bridge filled the space between them. Up close, he could see the strain around her eyes, the tightness of her mouth. The Ice Queen was gone. In her place was a woman holding on to her composure by a thread. "You signed the papers," she said. "It wasn't a question. You watched me do it." A faint, humorless twitch of her lips. "The office has cameras. I wanted to see it." The final flourish. She turned to look at the water. "Why did you propose here?" The question, so personal, so unexpected, pierced through him. "You know why? The view, the symbolism, building a bridge together. It seemed grand. It was grand," she said softly. "It was the grandest moment of my life. I believed you. I believed in the bridge." She turned her head, her eyes meeting his. They were glittering, but not with tears, with something harder. "But it was never a bridge, Richard. It was a drawbridge. And you were on the outside waiting to get in. And the moment you were across, you started burning it behind you." He had no defense. "Why are we here, June? The papers are signed. The deal is done. I'm on my way to the airport. Why bring me here?" "Because the deal I sent done," she said, her voice gaining an edge. "Signing a piece of paper in a lawyer's office is a transaction. It's not an end. I brought you here because this is where it started. And I needed to end here. I need you to look me in the eye and understand what you've lost. And I need to look you in the eye and know that I'm free of you." "You've made your point," he said, bitterness rising. "You've won. You've destroyed me. What more do you want?" "Blood." "I want the truth," she said, taking a step closer. The wind tore at her hair. "The whole truth. The papers have the financial truth, the legal truth. I want the human truth. Before you disappear forever, I want you to tell me to my face. Why? Not the money. I know about the money. Why me? Was it just the access? Was I just the richest, most gullible mark on your list?" He stared at her. This formidable, broken woman demanding an answer he'd never honestly given himself. The easy lie was on his lips. "Of course not. I loved you. But after that phone call, after the confession, lies were worthless currency." "At first, yes," he admitted. The words dragged from a deep, shameful place. "You were the ultimate prize, the sterling name, the fortune, the challenge. Getting you was the final boss level of the game I was playing." He swallowed the salt air, harsh in his throat. But then, for a while, it wasn't. For a while, you were different. You were a relief. You were calm. You were steady. You didn't play the games everyone else played. I thought I could stop playing too. I thought I could just be Richard Sterling and that would be enough. But it wasn't, she whispered. No, he said. The truth, a brutal catharsis. It was never enough. Being Richard Thorne wasn't enough. Being Richard Sterling, it was better, but it was still just a role, and the role came with rules. Your family's rules, the silent judgments, the history I wasn't part of, the constant feeling that I was a guest in my own life, the money. It started as a way to build my own foundation so I wouldn't feel like I was living in your house, so I could be my own man. It just escalated. It became a game again, a better, more dangerous game. And you became part of the board, a piece to be managed. She flinched as if struck. He'd finally said it, the unforgivable core of it. He hadn't just stolen from her, he had reduced her. And Samantha? She asked, her voice barely audible over the wind. Was she a piece too? Or was she real? He laughed, a short, ugly sound. Samantha? She was a mirror. She reflected back exactly what I wanted to see. A man who was powerful, exciting, in control. She didn't care about rules or history. She just wanted the spoils. She was simple. You were complicated. You demanded something real. Samantha let me pretend. June absorbed this. Turning back to the railing, her knuckles white where she gripped the cold metal. So, I was the complication and my money was the solution, and she was the reward. She summed it up with devastating clarity. You're a very small man, Richard, in a very expensive suit. There was nothing to say. She was right. I brought you here for one more reason, she said, not looking at him. She reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a small black electronic device, a digital voice recorder. She pressed a button. A red light glowed. The confession you signed is for the lawyers and the courts. This is for me. Say it again. Say everything you just said. For the record. My record. He stared at the recorder, then at her face, a mask of grim determination. This was the true price. Not just exile, but the immortalization of his shame. His voice on her device, admitting his own pathetic venal soul. Why? He breathed. Because when the ghost of you haunts me, she said, her eyes locking on his. When I wonder if I was a fool, if I dreamed the good parts, I will play this. And I will remember that the man I loved was a fiction. And the real you is this. A small, greedy boy who thought bridges were for burning. Now speak. And he did, with the wind howling and the great bridge soaring above them. He repeated it, the calculated pursuit, the fleeting moment of real affection, crushed by his own insecurity, the transactional view of their marriage, the embezzlement as a game, Samantha as a simple, shiny distraction. He laid his soul bare, not for leniency, but for her absolution. His voice, stripped of all charm, was flat, ugly, true. When he finished, she pressed the button. The red light died. She placed the recorder back in her pocket. It's over, she said. And for the first time, he believed she meant it. The war, the bitterness, the entanglement. It was done. He was just a problem that had been resolved. She turned to leave. June. He called out, the name torn from him. She paused, but didn't turn back. The 100,000, the passport. Thank you. The gratitude was genuine, and it was the most humiliating thing he'd ever said. She glanced over her shoulder, her profile etched against the bridge lights. Don't thank me. It's not mercy. It's housekeeping. Then she walked away, her figure growing smaller and smaller until she disappeared into the shadows near the parking lot, leaving him alone with the roar of the void. He stood there until the cold bit through to his bones. Then he turned and walked back to the waiting town car. The driver said nothing as he got in. The car pulled out, merging onto the highway, heading south once more, towards the airport, towards Bangkok, towards the empty life of David Rhee. In the back seat, Richard Thorne finally closed his eyes. The final confrontation was over. He had looked into the abyss of his own making, and it had stared back, and found him wanting. There was no fight left, no rage, no hope, just the long, silent flight into an anonymous night. San Francisco. 3 months later, the ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel was a galaxy of crystal, silver, and silk. The Future Founders Gala, the flagship fundraiser for the newly launched Sterling Women's Venture Capital Fund, was the social event of the season. Every tech titan, venture capitalist, and society page fixture in Northern California seemed to be in attendance. The air buzzing with the low hum of money, influence, and genuine curiosity. At the center of this galaxy, standing at a modest podium, was June Sterling. She wore a gown of deep emerald green, simple in cut, but exquisite in fabric, the color of new growth. Her hair was swept up, revealing the clean, strong lines of her neck and the simple diamond studs in her ears, her grandmother's. She looked, the society columnist for the Chronicle would later write, not like a woman who had recently endured a scandal, but like a queen who had quietly, decisively won a war. The soft chime of a spoon against crystal brought the room to a hush. 1,000 faces turned towards her. "Thank you," June began, her voice amplified yet intimate, carrying easily in the acoustically perfect room. "Thank you all for being here tonight, for believing in this fund, and more importantly, for believing in the extraordinary women it will empower." She paused, a practiced, comfortable silence. 3 months ago, the idea for this fund was just a note in the margin of a legal pad. It was born not from a place of triumph, but from a realization that the structures we often take for granted, partnerships, trusts, boards, can be fragile, that the keys to the kingdom can be misplaced or stolen. A respectful, knowing murmur rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew the subtext. The fall of Richard Thorne had been the business scandal of the year, covered with salacious detail and sober financial analysis. The narrative had solidified, the brilliant, predatory outsider exposed and vanquished by the quiet, steely powers who owned the kingdom all along. But fragility, June continued, her gaze sweeping the room, is not a weakness. It is a design specification. It tells us what needs reinforcement. This fund is not a charity. It is an architectural retrofit. It is about providing women with more than capital. It is about providing them with ownership, unassailable, legally fortified ownership of their ideas, their companies, and their destinies, so that their energy is spent on building, not on protecting their own foundations from those they let inside. The applause was immediate and sustained. It was the perfect sentiment, tough, smart, forward-looking, and wrapped in a socially conscious mission. It acknowledged the past without being defined by it. As she stepped away from the podium, the applause swelling, her eyes found Michael Chen in the crowd. He gave her a small, proud nod. Her partner in this, in everything now. Their relationship had evolved slowly, cautiously, from decades of friendship into something deeper, rooted in mutual respect and a shared understanding of the wreckage they had both navigated. He hadn't swooped in. He'd stood beside her. He'd run the company with a steady, ethical hand that had not only stabilized it, but restored its reputation. The board had made his position permanent last month. She moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations with a genuine smile that reached her eyes more often than it had in years. She shook hands, exchanged air kisses, listened to pitches for the new fund. She was in her element, but it was a different element now. The power she wielded was no longer reflected light from the sterling name. It was her own. A young woman with a determined gleam in her eye, a founder of a promising quantum computing startup, cornered her. Ms. Sterling, your story is so inspiring. To see you not just recover, but lead. It's what every woman in tech needs to see. June's smile remained warm, but a veil fell behind her eyes. Thank you. But the story isn't about me. It's about the fund. Tell me about your noise suppression problem. As she listened to the technical explanation, a part of her mind, a quiet chamber she seldom visited, replayed a different conversation. A voice on a windswept bridge, small and greedy. You were the complication, and my money was the solution. The digital recorder was in her safe, next to the confession. She had never listened to it again. She didn't need to. The words were etched into her, an inoculation against nostalgia. They were the fire that had burned away the last of the phantom limb pain. A waiter passed with champagne. She took a flute, the bubbles a faint tickle. Across the room, she saw Eleanor Vance deep in conversation with a state senator. Eleanor caught her eye and raised her glass in a subtle salute. The legal fortress was holding. The non-disclosures were airtight. Richard Thorne had vanished as completely as a stone dropped in a deep lake. Her phone, a new secure model, vibrated discreetly in her small clutch. A notification from Lionel Shaw. Not an alert, but a scheduled weekly report. She excused herself and stepped onto a quiet terrace overlooking the glittering city. The night air was cool. She opened the encrypted message. Subject, Weekly Surveillance Digest. No change. Asset subject remains in designated locale, Chiang Mai, Thailand. Low-profile existence confirmed. Primary expenditure, rent, food, liquor. No attempts to contact previous networks. No financial activity outside of monitored account. Balance, 42,117. No interaction with you. Consular services. Health stable. Psychological profile consistent with resigned anonymity. No flags. Monitoring continues per protocol. Chiang Mai. She'd never been. She pictured humid air, noisy streets, the smell of street food and exhaust. A man named David Ree drinking cheap whiskey in a rented room, watching the world move on without him. A ghost with a bank balance. The leash, as she'd told him, was not just the confession, but Lionel's silent, perpetual surveillance. She would always know where he was. He would never be free. And that, she had come to understand, was a more profound punishment than any prison. It was life as a museum exhibit of his own failure. She deleted the message. It was housekeeping, maintenance on a concluded chapter. Everything all right? Michael's voice was soft beside her. He joined her at the railing, his presence a solid, comforting warmth. Just the usual updates, she said, leaning slightly into his shoulder. All quiet, he's not coming back. June, Michael said, not as empty reassurance but as a statement of operational fact. I know, and I'm not looking over my shoulder. I'm looking forward. The Napa property closes next week. A genuine smile broke across his face. You're really selling the Broadway house? I already have. The new owners take possession in a month. A nice family from Seattle. Tech. They have 2 young children. The place needs the noise. The decision had been surprisingly easy. The mansion was a beautiful shell, a stage set for a play that had ended in tragedy. She donated half the art to museums, kept a few pieces that spoke to her, and was letting the rest go with the house. Her parents' portraits were in storage. She wasn't ready for them, but she no longer felt obligated to live in their museum. And the Valley House? Michael asked, referring to the modern glass and steel estate in Napa she'd bought with her own proceeds. Designed by a brilliant female architect, it's waiting. It's all light and open space. No shadows. She took his hand. I was thinking, the first board retreat for the fund could be held there. A working weekend. Less stifling than a hotel. That's a great idea, he said, lacing his fingers with hers. A fresh start in every way. They stood in companionable silence, looking at the city. Her city, not by inheritance, but by conquest. She had taken it back. Later, as the gala wound down, a reporter from a major financial network managed to get a moment with her. The camera light was harsh. Ms. Sterling, an incredible night. The fund is a runaway success, but people are still fascinated by the personal journey. What's the one thing you want people to take away from the story of the last few months? June looked directly into the camera, her gaze clear and unwavering. That resilience isn't something you're born with. It's something you build, brick by brick. Sometimes with the very stones that were thrown at you. And that the most important fortress you'll ever build is the one around your own sense of self. Protect that at all costs. The reporter, sensing there would be no salacious details, no tears, nodded professionally. A powerful message. Thank you, Ms. Sterling. Back in her penthouse apartment, a temporary, sleek space in a new building downtown, chosen for its security and its lack of history, June finally kicked off her heels. The silence was different here. It was a choice. It was peaceful. On the sleek console, a single physical letter waited. It had been forwarded by Eleanor. The return address was a federal correctional institution in Central California. She knew what it was before she opened it. She used a silver letter opener. It was from Samantha Lee. Her plea bargain had been finalized. 18 months for her minor role in the fraud and for accepting stolen property in exchange for testimony that was no longer needed. The letter was short, scrawled on prison stationery. June. I know I have no right to write. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to say, from this lovely concrete box, that I'm sorry. Not for him, for my part in it. I was stupid and greedy, and I thought I was playing a game. I didn't see the real people getting hurt. You didn't have to give the DA what you had on me, but you did. I guess that's the difference between you and him. You follow through. I hope your new fund does well. SL June read it twice, then fed it into the cross-cut shredder beside the desk. The apology was not accepted, but it was noted. Another loose end. Tied. Samantha's fate was her own. June felt nothing for her. Pity was a luxury for those who hadn't been in the trenches. She walked to the wall of windows. Down below, the city pulsed with light and life. She thought of the Napa house, of the fund, of Michael, of the quiet, unshakable authority she now carried within her. They had all underestimated her. Richard, the board, the society pages, even, for a time, herself. They had seen the wife, the victim. They had thought breaking her would be like breaking a piece of fine, old china, a tragic shattering. But they were wrong. She was not china. She was the kiln. And the fire that had been meant to consume her had instead forged something entirely new, something tempered, unbreakable, and utterly her own. A phoenix not from ashes, but from purified ore. And her flight, she knew, was just beginning.